This episode is brought to you by Heyday. Feeling stressed? Take a moment for yourself with Heyday. Stroll through rows of golden wheat, tend to cute barnyard animals, and discover the joys of a digital farm retreat. You don't have to hop in a car or catch a plane. Escape to the farm at the tap of a finger. With Heyday, you're not just tending to a farm, you're tending to yourself. Heyday. Search Heyday, that's Hay space DAY, in your favorite app store. Heyday is a free-to-play mobile game and offers optional in-app purchases and random rewards.
Welcome back to I Want That Too, the podcast where Disney merch meets Disney history. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and as always, I'm joined by the lovely and exhausted Lauren Hersey.
Do I look that bad tonight?
You look, in fact, that's the thing. You look lovely. That's why the lovely Lauren Hersey. But when I hear your schedule, I just listening to your schedule, I want to lie down because you just got back from Disney and you're headed there again this weekend, right?
Yes. And I was actually just before we hopped on trying to see if I could get our dates moved up a day, because what's wrong with me? Why don't I need more? But yes, we are leaving Friday to go back to Orlando, this time just Lainey and I, for a cheer competition. So we're staying at Universal, and the cheer competition is at the convention center. I'm brand new to the world of this type of cheerleading. Not new to cheerleading, but new to competitive cheerleading. So this is our first ever, it's called The One cheer competition. Do you remember when you lived in Orlando, cheerleaders from everywhere raining down on the area? Did you have to deal with any of that?
What's interesting, again, is that I know, obviously, folks who work in themed entertainment, and this became such an important market segment. For example, Universal Studios Florida, they had for their Wild Wild West theater, which used to be between where Harry Potter or Jaws used to be back in the day, and what was it? Men in Black Alien Attack. But what was interesting is that they would do their stunt show during the day, but they would also make sure to carve out specific hours on specific days for when cheerleading groups were in town to do competitions in that space. But ultimately, what they decided to do was they realized, well, we probably need to get this away from the park. So, first of all, I have to ask, what hotel are you staying at when you go down for the competition?
They're all staying at Dockside. So Endless Summer, Dockside.
Okay, that's interesting because Cabana Bay, if you go to not the tower side of Cabana Bay, the low-slung, almost motel-like side of that faces into the pool, toward the back there are two pavilions that were actually deliberately built as part of that moderate resort with the idea that, well, we get so many cheerleading groups that come down here. We want to make a hotel that's cheerleader-friendly. So they created that open space toward the back there, and then two separate pavilions with the idea that two different cheerleading groups could practice at the same time and have both space out on the AstroTurf where the girls could be practicing their routines, and also giant things of shade so the girls who weren't out actually practicing could get out of the sun. And I want to say that Dockside has an expansive pool area with a lot of these features as well. So
I have no idea. I thought it was an odd hotel, and all the cheerleaders are kind of all staying at the same hotel. And then I'm not sure how far the convention center is from there, or why they picked it. But I was like, I'm assuming you could stay wherever you want. So I'm like, Lainey, you want to try to stay at Helios or what were the other, the Terra Luna or something something like that. And she was like, "Oh, the cheerleaders though, they're going to be a duck size." So I was like,
no, and that's the thing. That's her people, all right?
Right.
She wants to be with her people for the competition. So, and again, you're a good mom to cave to your daughter's desire here rather than going to check out the new, hotel over at Epic. But good mom.
I know. Listen, and I was trying to get an extra day, maybe like go to Epic again while we're down there. I saw this week that some of the folks, and I don't know, this isn't confirmed, I saw it on social media, were saying if you were staying at some of the hotels on property at Universal, not just Helios, you could also pay the extra and go check out Epic. Have you heard that?
I have, but again, what's been interesting is they seem to have extended the annual pass holder preview. I want to say Alicia Stella was pointing out that they'd added additional dates. So what's interesting about that is that suggests this is a company that's very confident about this park. That there's no sense of, okay, we need to shut down for a week to 10 days out ahead of our grand opening to repaint and plant the good stuff. It's like, oh, no, we can juice this baby right up to launch.
Or I have another, so somebody in my life who is going to Helios a stay next week, they had called and had to make a change. And the person they talked to said that they were not near the numbers that they thought that they were going to be at. And so they were a bit concerned.
Oh.
Not to break any Universal news over here on I Want That Too, the merch show, but I did hear it from a reputable source.
That's intriguing. Okay. Well, your husband and I will follow up on that.
Yes, please do. There were a couple things we were talking about that might be good for the Epic Universal podcast. So, yes, I am, to make a long story short, I'm nuts, and I'm going back to Florida next week.
All right. And again, at some point in the not so distant future, the word coma springs to mind, but
yes, long summer's nap in June.
Yeah, but again, you come home for that and then like straight into Hunter's high school graduation, right?
Yes. I just sent out his invitations this week. Like I said on our last show, I could have used some of those Betty White stamps.
They're off limits. You can't have them.
They're too fancy for sending them out. But so he has prom at the end of May, and then graduation, and then his graduation party. So it's all like bam, bam, bam. I need to be like on a beach somewhere.
Okay. All right. Well, we will work on that. Mind you, you'll have to record a podcast while you're doing it, but we'll talk about that later. Now,
yes.
And speaking of podcasts, we need to actually get to ours.
Oh, yes. Okay. So today we got a lot going on. We got some mainstream trends that are now showing up in the parks. There's some cool new merch while I was down there last week. And later in the show, Jim is going to be talking to us about the surprising connection between Disney and NASA. But before we get to all of that, let's thank our sponsor.
Yes, and that would be the world of DVC. Now, are you planning a Disney trip? Which can be overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. Be Our Guest Vacations takes care of all the details, park reservations, dining, and more, so you can focus on the fun. Their expert travel planners offer personalized service at no extra cost to you. So whether it's a Disney cruise, a trip to the parks, or another magical destination, Universal,
sorry, Disney.
They'll handle everything. So visit beourguestvacations.com to start planning your next adventure today. All right, so we now get to the news portion of the show, Lauren. So what do you got?
Well, I don't know if it's news, per se, but wanted to spend some time talking a little bit about Epcot and our time there, which of all the parks was probably the most enjoyable the week of Easter. The first day we went, it was not as enjoyable. I'm talking like 45-minute waits for Living on the Land and out the door for Figment.
Okay.
Yeah, but the second time we went back, it was, lot less of that. But when we walked in, something that we noticed before, and tell me if you like, for all the times I've been there, I've never noticed, but to the right, walking in of Spaceship Earth, there's a shop. It's called Pin Trader. And literally there were probably at least a dozen pin collectors there with their books, their collections sprawled out. And I'm like, there must be like an unofficial pin trading. I'm sure there are many of unofficial communities, but all these people met up to like do pin trading in a big way. Have you seen this before in the parks?
Every so often. I mean, I have to admit, I'm always intrigued to see where they congregate. I mean, for example, a recent trip out to Disneyland, you had to walk deep back into the park, but they were there in Frontierland in sort of the main drag set up there. But again, they brought their pin books and they were ready to trade. And man, there were some amazing pins. Half the fun was looking at the collections these folks had assembled, and more to the point, what they were looking for to complete their collections. And by the way, you have a small boy that started down this road, correct?
Oh, yes. So he was so excited from the moment, like, we ended up leaving later that day. Like, he just wanted to get back because his people were there and he wasn't. So he had decided while we were there, we went in, I believe we got it at Pin Trader, I could be wrong, but he got his official, like, the Pin Trader backpack, or I'm sorry, it was a crossbody. And this one specifically said like 25 years of pin trading. Yeah. And so he finally, like, when he saw all the big books of pins that these professional, collectors had, he was like, I have to up my game. I can't just have these lanyards anymore.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
So we took the next step in pin trading, and we got him the official, the crossbody, and he was looking for dates. He was on a kick, and so he wanted to see as far back as he could get as far as dates. So really an interesting experience. And I think I talked last episode about me actually getting the best Disney backpack ever inside of Pin Trader, which is the store that was behind all the actual pin traders. I have to tell you about the backpack real quick. Okay. So I have all these lounge flies. I have a ton of crossbodies. I have like a Walt Disney we have a ton of backpacks, that whole situation. But this one is black. There's a new-ish, I would say maybe 6 months line of Disney crossbodies, bags, full-size backpacks. They're black and white, the best of the best. And it's about yay big, maybe a little larger than a lounge fly, but soft. It has the netted pockets for a water bottle. Like, it could fit a full-size water bottle. Down in the front, it has like a hook that you could put your mini ears on, like if they're squeezing your brains out. And there's a lot of it's very functional, a lot of, functional pockets. And the coolest thing was it was only $45.
Wow.
Which is kind of like half of a lounge fly.
Oh, yeah, easy.
Yeah, so my mom has one. I bought my best friend one while I was down there. I'm like, this is the greatest. So you can get them everywhere, not just Pin Trader. That's where I got mine specifically. But back to pins, did you know, and I don't know if this is as a part of the anniversary celebration, but every Tuesday on the Disney store that they drop a new set of pins that are out that they promote.
No. Oh, this is intriguing. Okay.
8 a.m. Pacific time. I'm sorry, I don't know that I said Pacific time. But right now, if you go, there's obviously we just celebrated Earth Day. There's limited edition Pirates of the Caribbean Mystery Blind Pack. And these ones look like they go together like a puzzle. There's May the 4th be with you. Obviously, and it has the days that the pins are dropping. May 6th, there's the 3D Han Solo Millennium Falcon pin. So pretty cool. And there's some Disney Store exclusives. There's a Winnie the Pooh and Tigger graduation pin. So if you are a pin collector, I never noticed before that they're doing these big Tuesday drops, but it's just at disneystore.com/collectible/pins.
Well, I'll have to go check that out. Okay. All right. So anything else you observed during your day at Epcot?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so Epcot is like my favorite park. And I think that, there's nostalgia there for me, but it's also, there's always something for everybody in the party to do. And you just talked about Hunter's graduation. I have to tell you about one of our traditions. So on the back side of Spaceship Earth, and I'm hoping that it stays at least for Lainey, but it says Project Tomorrow, and it's on a blue wall. And so since we've started going to Disney, every trip we take our kids pictures in front of this sign with the intention to use them at their graduation parties.
No. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this was one of the first times that I think I've seen Eric tear up. But we did go to Creations and got Hunter the 2025 graduation ear cap. And this year they actually had a headband as well with the little graduation cap in the ears, a mini ears.
Okay.
So they're $34.99, and then a very cute class of 2025 shirt. So we had Hunter put on his shirt, put on his ears, and take his final Project Tomorrow picture.
Oh, right, and it's a cute picture. I just hope Project Tomorrow stays in there, because aren't they putting a lounge or a bar in that corner of Spaceship Earth?
Yes, they are, but I don't know that that's the exact spot. And for all the changes that they've made, they haven't messed with that one wall yet.
Okay.
Knock on wood, because Miles, my youngest, he had his his first park visit was 4 weeks old. And so from 4 weeks, I don't know that we're going to make it to 18 with him. He's 8 with them not messing with the wall. But very, very cute. Lots of cute graduation items there. Another different because we were there, Flower and Garden Festival, we've talked about all the merch for that already. Something I think that it's in his second year is, as far as souvenirs go, it's a kind of a DIY souvenir. It's make your own glasswork in the Germany pavilion, and it's just there for the festival. Have you seen this before?
No, this is I'm just looking at the photos that you're sharing, and wow, what an intriguing hands-on experience. Do you want to describe what's going on here?
Yeah, so it is designing your own glass fusion art, and they do have some local artisans or Disney artisans there to help you. You're not on it, by doing it yourself, but you can make things from plates to picture frames, night lights. They had a lot of different options, and so you decorate with these they're pieces of glass, or they kind of look like beads, and then it's kiln fused, and then you could take it home. And some of them were as low as $14.99. And I don't even think you could get a hot dog at Disney for $14.99.
Yeah, and to get something that you yourself assembled, that they then, out of glass, and that they then go off and kiln fuse that together. And I assume you assemble it, you hand it off to them, and you have to come back and collect it later, right? Or
well, we were kind of rushing around, and so we didn't get to actually do it, but I would assume, I really just stood and watched people, putting together their pieces. But I would assume that you have to just come back later and get it. Just like at the resorts when you do the, the pottery, you come back the next day, but for Epcot, it's probably a little later.
Got it. Got it. I see here in your notes, by the way, that I guess you do leave it with them, and it can be mailed to your home for what?
I did. Yes, I did see that.
All right. So for a flat $14.99 fee. So
there we go.
Okay, so no, you can't wait. They will send it to your home. You're getting it sent
to your house.
Okay, that's all right. Well, no, thank you for the description of this is Flower and Garden that's going on right now, right?
Yes, and when we're back down this coming week, we got the plain white teas that are going to be there for, I believe, 4 nights, and I think that's a get. So I might mosey on back over to Epcot to maybe see the plain white teas. Lainey even knew who that was. I think they were on iCarly at some point in time, so she was jazzed. And while I'm there, I might do my most favorite thing, which at this exact moment it changes, but is riding Guardians of the Galaxy. I swear it's the best ride at Disney, period. It is so good. But when we go, Miles hates Guardians, will not go on it. So where Miles and Gogo end up spending a ton of time is at the Mission Space Playground at the exit of the ride. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, they built this ridiculously elaborate setup where there are games and interactive exhibits and things to climb through, and that's the thing. Most people, because they're slightly nauseous getting off of Mission Space, kind of I need to find a bathroom, and just blow right through this place. So it's most of the time I've been in there, it's semi-private. I mean, you've got these wide open spaces to play in.
Yes, and if you are heading to the parks when it's hot, this is our the best hidden spot for AC, chargers for your cell phone. It's called the Play Space.
Yep.
And I mean, it's lovely. We spend a ton of time in there. So this last trip, which kind of gets us to the feature of today's episode. The last trip, Miles and Gogo, they go to play, and Eric and I go meet them, when we're done riding the ride. And I guess I just never noticed how much NASA, Star Wars, there's crystals, the merch that is in the Mission Space Cargo Bay gift shop. So of course I had to ask Jim, what is this all about? I feel like it was kind of like when we were at Fort Wilderness with all the Smokey the Bear merch from episode 5. So what's the deal?
Oh, well, it's a very interesting tale about how Disney and NASA are kind of intertwined. And folks, we will get to that story right after this break.
Hilton brings you new ways to stay with experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks, or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Visit USAA.com/bundle.
Bundle savings are off total premium, not available in all states or in all situations. To qualify, auto policy must be active prior to property policy issue, subject to change. Restrictions apply. Membership eligibility and product restrictions apply and are subject to change. USAA means United Services Automobile Association and its affiliates, San Antonio, Texas.
All right, so we're back. And again, Lauren, after having visited the post-show gift shop at Mission Space and noticing all the cool NASA stuff, was asking about Disney and its history with NASA. And there's definitely a history there. I mean, to explain, Walt Disney was a futurist. By that I mean he was somebody who had a vision of the future, especially in relationship to technology. I mean, if you look what that guy did during the last decade of his life, he built Disneyland out in Anaheim, which had a Tomorrowland where guests could experience a rocket to the moon that was based on scientific knowledge of the day. Walt also worked with Alweg, a Swiss company, to bring their monorail system to the United States, which he eventually used to hook his theme park up to the Disneyland Hotel. And then, of course, there was Epcot, Walt's planned experimental prototype city of tomorrow. Not a theme park, but we'll talk about that later. But again, Walt the futurist was interested in not just what man would do once we actually began exploring outer space, but he was also interested in what we were going to do back down here on Earth, what we could do to make the future a better place. But anyway, getting back to NASA now, Lauren, there are people who will tell you if it hadn't been for an early episode of the Disneyland TV show, there might never have been a National Aeronautics and Space Administration.
What?
Yep.
I don't know. Is that loaded? Like, what's that about?
Well, okay. So let's take climb in the DeLorean with me now. We're going back to Wednesday evening, March 9th, 1955. And then President Dwight D. Eisenhower is returning to the residence after a long, stressful day down in the Oval Office. And by the way, all this stress was going to catch up with Ike just 6 months later. Eisenhower would have a full-on heart attack while he was in office. Wound up being hospitalized for treatment on September 24th, same year, 1955. Wouldn't get out of the hospital for, 8 weeks, till November 11th. Interesting thing, though, cardiac event at this point. Still, a half a year off. Because, again, it's March 9th, 1955. And Ike just wants to relax. He just wants to sit in front of the television with his wife, Mamie, and watch something mindless and entertaining. But here's the thing. He opens the TV guide. Only 3 channels at this point. There's NBC, CBS, ABC. Let's be honest here. Eisenhower's don't have a lot to choose from. There's the Arthur Godfrey and Friends show. That's on CBS, and it's kind of a talk show, variety show thing. Then there's Coke Time with Eddie Fisher, which I want to stress here.
I'm like, what kind of Coke is that?
Coca-Cola sponsored the show, that kind of show. And Eddie's a crooner and he's singing popular songs of the day. And Coca-Cola. All right. And then over on ABC, there was the Disneyland TV show. And look, I am not sure why Ike and Mamie opt to watch Disneyland that night. Maybe Eisenhower's granddaughter, Susan, is visiting the White House at the time. She was 8. So maybe they decided we should watch something more family-friendly. But what the Eisenhowers got when they tuned into Disneyland that night was an episode called Man in Space, which took a very realistic, science-factual approach to the challenge of space travel. And here's the thing, Lauren. Ike was fascinated by what he saw. So much so, the very next day, March 10th, 1955, Eisenhower picks up the phone in the Oval Office and calls Walt Disney. And after first telling Walt, I really enjoyed that Man in Space show last night, but he makes a personal request. He said, could I get a print on that TV program? Could you send that up to Washington? There's some generals here at the Pentagon I'd really like to show that to. And Walt's like, well, of course, Mr. President, I'll put a print on a plane headed east later today. And that's what Disney does.
Oh, by the way, can you imagine even being Walt Disney and just getting a random call from the president to say, like, hey, man, I like what you're doing?
Yeah, well, what's especially interesting is that Vice President Richard Nixon was actually the California's representative for Orange County, which was where Disneyland was built. And so what's fascinating is there was a time in the 1950s, I mean, for example, when they cut the ribbon on the monorail, Nixon and Pat and Julie and Tricia were there in the park with Walt. In fact, there's this wonderful footage of them cutting the ribbon for the monorail. But the thing is, Nixon's got a big pair of bogus scissors that couldn't cut butter. You know, and he's trying to cut the thing for the monorail. And Walt reaches into his pocket and pulls out a pocket knife to cut the ribbon. And you can literally see the Secret Service guys in the background sort of go white because it's like, he's got a knife. It's like, it's a pocket knife. He's Walt Disney. Calm down. All right. So anyway, back to these people at the Pentagon that Ike wants to show Man in Space to. Now, it would be nice to report that they watch the show and they immediately see the wisdom of Walt Disney is suggesting. But that's not what happened, Lauren. You know, all of these generals and admirals over at the Pentagon, they dither, they debate, they delay. Particularly, they asked the president for more time to study this issue. Here's the thing, though. Time runs out 18 months later. This is when the Soviets launched Sputnik 1 on October 4th, 1957, which then became the first artificial satellite to circle Earth. And the United States, like it or not, now finds itself in the space race. And all of the brass over at the Pentagon now have no choice. They have to move fast. So 7 weeks later, November 1957, the Special Committee on Space Technology is formed. And the official mandate for this quickly slapped together organization, and I'm quoting from a press release that the Pentagon issued back in the day, mandate is to coordinate various branches of the federal government, private enterprise, as well as various universities around the United States and harness all of that expertise with the end goal being the development of an official U.S. space program. Now, where this gets interesting is before Sputnik 1 began circling the Earth, October 57, Walt airs a second space-based episode of his Disneyland TV show. This one, entitled Man and the Moon, debuts on ABC December 28, 1955. And just like Man in Space, it takes a reality-based, science-factual approach to explaining how mankind might actually make it to the lunar surface, more to the point, what we do once we got there. But then, now that the Disneyland TV show has demonstrated how man could first potentially reach outer space and then travel to the moon, it was now time for Mars and Beyond, which was the third and final installment of this series, which again, reality-based, science-factual approach. And again, I know I'm using that term a lot, but I want to stress, not science fiction, not Star Trek, not Lost in Space, but rather what the science at the time told us what might be possible in the near future. So, all right. Anyway, kicker here is third and final installment of this space-based series of shows, again, called Mars and Beyond. It airs on ABC, again, part of the Disneyland TV show, December 4th, 1957, which is just 2 months after the Soviets launch Sputnik 1 into Earth orbit. And this episode just galvanizes the American television viewing public, so much so that television viewers are all over the country. They write to their congressmen or they pick up their phones and call Washington and say, hey, give those guys who are working on the Special Committee on Space Technology whatever they want. It's crucial that we as Americans, we get up to outer space as quickly as possible. We can't let the Russians beat us to the moon or Mars and beyond. So we were a very suggestible people. All right. Anyway, public now is obviously solidly behind the idea of the United States entering the space race. And with that, NASA gets founded just 8 months later, July 29th, 1958. And Lauren, the powers that be in Washington, D.C., they take note of what just happened. You know, how easy it was to get NASA up and running because they had a gifted storyteller like Walt Disney in their corner, telling the American TV watching public that, well, yeah, it may be expensive. And yes, it may take years to actually achieve these goals, but it will all be worth it when men finally conquer space. And the thinking at that time was, well, maybe we're going to need Walt's help again when it comes to the next phase of this plan, which is when we go to put a man on the moon. But we'll get to that part of the story in a moment. But first, this.
You're the perfect blend of elegance and style, and your ride should be no different. The 2024 Hyundai Sonata Hybrid meets all your needs, from business to brunch and everywhere in between. With head-turning details like a sleek front end, plus stylish interior, and an available 12.3-inch digital instrument cluster and seamless tech integration. Okay, Hyundai. Visit HyundaiUSA.com to learn more about the new 2024 Hyundai Sonata Hybrid.
The new McCrispy Strip is here. Dip approved by ketchup, tangy barbecue, honey mustard, Sprite, McFlurry, Big Mac sauce, double dipped in buffalo and ranch, more ranch, and creamy chili McCrispy Strip Dip. Now at McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Switch to Verizon Business and get more from your internet without paying more for your internet. Get LTE Business Internet starting at $39 a month when paired with select business mobile plans. That's unlimited data, and with it, unlimited possibilities. Start saving today with Verizon Business, ranked #1 in small business internet customer satisfaction by J.D. Power. Starting price for 25 megabits per second LTE internet plan with smartphone plan savings, plus taxes, fees, and economic adjustment charge. Terms apply. For J.D. Power 2024 award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
And we're back. Okay, so again, Lauren Hersey and I are talking about those 3 space-based episodes of the Disneyland TV series, Men in Space, Man at the Moon, and Mars and Beyond. And again, a reminder, these were reality-based and science-factual. They used the science of the day to extrapolate how man might actually achieve these goals. But where this gets interesting, well, again, Walt Disney Productions, right up until the Disneyland TV show debuts on ABC, October of 54, not exactly a place that shines a spotlight on the frontiers of science. Back then, the wags in the entertainment industry called Walt set up in Burbank. Lauren, they called it the Mouse Factory. You know, this was the outfit in Hollywood that regularly churned out animated shorts featuring an unintelligible duck. All right. And this is the thing. So how does Disney go from pumping out Chip and Dale cartoons to telling the American people how they're someday going to go to the moon? Well, what they did is they brought in an expert to serve as a consultant on this trio of what Walt wanted to be reality-based science factual shows. And that man was Wernher von Braun. And by the way, Lauren, this is a man who clearly knew a thing or two about rockets, given that back during World War II, he worked with the Nazis to develop the V2 program. And by the way, this was a single-stage ballistic missile, and not to put too fine a point on it, the V in V2 stood for vengeance.
Not something I'd want to mess with.
No, this was the weapon that the Axis powers developed during the latter days of World War II. We're talking fall of 44. In effect, to pay the Allies back for bombing German cities. So before VE Day, that's Victory in Europe Day, which, by the way, happened May 8th, 1945, 3,000 of these things came raining down on London and Antwerp, killing an estimated 9,000 civilians and military personnel. What's interesting, though, as soon as World War I is officially over in Europe, all is forgiven. Because if we're being blunt here, the Allies wanted to take advantage of that V2 technology to then bring an end to what was then going on in the Pacific Theater. And just a reminder, VJ Day, Victory over Japan Day. That wouldn't happen for another 3 months yet. September 2nd, 1945. And I hesitate to bring this up, but literally the bloodiest battle in the Pacific Theater, Operation Iceberg, the Battle of Okinawa, that didn't happen till after VE Day, and then ran through June 22nd of 1945. Lauren, it's hard to even wrap head around the level of casualties here. The Battle of Okinawa, over 200,000 people, U.S. servicemen, Japanese soldiers, and Okinawan civilians died.
This is making me really sad. How did we get here from space?
Well, but this was the thing. You have to understand that the guys at the Pentagon, this is why they're so eager to tap into the German expertise when it comes to weaponry. At this point during World War II, they are willing to do anything to bring this conflict to an end, which is why Wernher von Braun, along with 1,600 other German scientists, technicians, and engineers, are brought stateside as part of something that was known as Project Paperclip, and they're then told, you work for us now. Okay, jump ahead. Fall of 1945, World War II ends. And von Braun, because of that whole V2 thing, finds that he doesn't have a whole lot of fans over at the Pentagon. And Werner's pleas for additional supplies to continue his rocketry research. By the way, late 40s, early 1950s, von Braun and his team are actually stationed at Fort Bliss down in Texas. These requests fall on deaf ears. So Wernher, he takes a different approach to how am I going to get my ideas out there? In 1952, he starts writing a series of articles for Collier's magazine about how he thinks that man will conquer space soon. And these articles, Lauren, which again take a science factual approach to the project, catch the eye of one Walt Disney. So Walt invites Wernher out to Hollywood and explains that he's working on Disneyland, more to the point that Disney wants his family fun park to have a rocket to the moon ride that will take a realistic approach to this excursion, which is why Walt would like Wernher to consult on this project. And von Braun is delighted to be offered this opportunity, but at the same time, he wants Walt to understand what he's potentially exposing the Disney organization to by bringing him in as a consultant. So Wernher supposedly says to Walt, you know who I am, what I've done. And Disney's response was, well, you know who I am, what I've done. And Walt then goes on to remind von Braun that Disney Studios made the movie Victory Through Air Power. This was released in 1943, and that movie was supposedly what convinced the U.S. government to begin long-range bombing of Germany. Not to mention all of the training films that Disney Studios made during World War II that helped U.S. troops identify and then shoot down Japanese and German aircraft. So as far as Walt Disney was concerned, both of their hands were dirty. And that's like, look, by collaborating on this rocket to the moon thing for Disneyland, well, Wernher and Walt could now work on something optimistic, something positive, something that would entertain and inform mankind rather than needlessly injure them. And it was consulting on that rocket to the moon ride that then led to Wernher being recruited to work on those 3 space-based episodes of the Disneyland TV show. And given that 40 million people tuned in to view Man in Space back in March of 1955, von Braun immediately sees the value of working with a master storyteller like Walt Disney to get ideas like this out in front of the general public. And not to mention that now von Braun's association with Walt Disney Production, it turns around his reputation with movers and shakers in the U.S. military. So, okay, we now jump ahead to 1965. Wernher is now the director of the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama.
This guy has lived like 10 lives.
Yeah, no. And it continues. It continues. So, and by the way, his primary goal at this point is to get an American on the moon before the Soviets managed to do the same thing. And remember, on the heels of Sputnik going into Earth orbit, October of 57, the Soviets also managed to get the first man in space. That was Yuri Gagarin, and that was April of 61. All right, so now von Braun is determined the U.S. space program is not going to be skunked again. He's going to make sure this time NASA's going to beat the Soviets. And Wernher seems to think that Walt Disney holds the key to getting an American on the moon first. Because again, remember, von Braun remembered what happened after Mars and Beyond aired on ABC December 57, just a few months after the Soviets put Sputnik into Earth orbit. How all those Americans reached out to their congressmen and said, give those folks who are starting up the U.S. space program whatever they want. We can't let the Russians win the space race. So now Wernher knows that the Apollo program is going to be hideously expensive. It's $25 billion in 1965 dollars. By the way, if you use the inflation calculator, that's $250 billion in 2025 dollars. And Wernher knows that the American public, while prideful, also fickle. And it's entirely possible they will turn their back on the idea of an American being the first man on the moon when faced with that sort of price tag. Which is why von Braun wants Walt to do another series of reality-based science-factual episodes of his weekly TV series. And by the way, now it's not the Disneyland TV show anymore, not airing on ABC. It's now over on NBC on Sunday nights, and it's known as Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color. And the idea is that these episodes would get Americans as excited about being the first country on the moon as they were about Man in Space, Man in the Moon, and Mars and Beyond back in the mid-50s. So, April 13th, 1965, Wernher von Braun gives Walt Disney and his brother Roy a personal tour of the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. And over the course of this tour, Wernher reportedly pitches Walt on the idea of doing another series of reality-based science factual shows for television, but with these episodes focusing on man reaching the moon. And Walt, well, he doesn't say no. But what's kind of funny is in this exact window of time, the Imagineers are prepping a redo of Tomorrowland for Disneyland. That project's going to get underway in the fall of the next year, 1966, open in the summer of 67. So Walt is actually kind of anxious to talk to Wernher because, he wants to know what NASA's plans are for reaching the moon so he can then go back and tell the Imagineers to make this as realistic as possible, because this is what Wernher told me. But that said, 1965 is a crazy busy time in Walt Disney's life. I mean, planning is already well underway for Project Florida, the theme park and resort that his company, that's why they bought all that swampland just outside of Orlando. Then there's Mineral King, the year-round ski resort that Walt Disney Productions is looking to build in Northern California, just beyond the borders of Sequoia National Forest. And then there are all the shows that Walt just built for the New York World's Fair which is about to shut down, so they can all be packed up and shipped to California so these same shows can be installed at Disneyland. And never mind about Walt's plans for Epcot, the city. So my point learned is Walt was busy.
Like it.
Yeah, so he effectively tells Wernher, look, let's continue to talk about this. But what neither man knew in April of 65 is that at that point, Walt Disney only had 20 more months to live. He passes away December 15th, 1966, and with Disney's death, von Braun lost a vocal advocate and passionate supporter of the U.S. space program. And by the way, Wernher wasn't wrong about the American public, that they're fickle and that they have a short attention span. Almost from the moment that Neil Armstrong first set foot on the moon in July of 1969, folks in the United States lost interest in the space program, and which is what compelled von Braun to retire from NASA in the early 70s and enter private industry. But that said, Lauren, before he officially left NASA, von Braun developed the idea of space camp, because Wernher's time with Walt had shown him how important it was to keep the next generation excited about space exploration. And anyway, Wernher, he dies of pancreatic cancer in June of 1977, just 5 years after he retired from NASA. And curiously, both Wernher and Walt were 65 when they passed. And one final little weird bend on this story. When von Braun was stationed at Fort Bliss back in the late 1940s, he married Maria Louisa von Quistorp, who was his maternal first cousin. And Wernher and Maria were happily married for 30 years. And as for von Braun's widow, she passed away in January of this year, 2025, age of 97. And she was actually in your neck of the woods, Alexandria, Virginia. How close is that to where you and Eric live?
I mean, we're at the top of West Virginia, and then Virginia would be under West Virginia, actually. So probably 6 hours, 7 hours.
Okay, all right. So
in the area of the country.
In this part of the side of the country. Anyway, okay. So anyway, Lauren, there's your Disney NASA story and how the history of this entertainment company and the National Aeronautics and Space Administration weirdly intertwined.
I mean, Walt and dinosaurs last week, Walt and sending people to the moon. Like, I think we all knew that he was a spectacular individual that like had a lot of sway. But the moon and dinosaurs, next level of coolness.
I agree.
For me. But I do think on that note, I think it's time we close up shop for today. What do you say, Jim?
I agree, but thanks again for suggesting that story. By the way, folks, if you want to stay up to date about everything that's happening across the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network, be sure you're following us on Facebook, Instagram, and X. We post all the latest updates and news from our shows, so you won't miss a thing. And if you're looking for even more insider Disney stories, check out our Patreon community. A lot of stuff happening over there, like Disney Unpacked, the video show that I do with Len Testa, and veteran Imagineer Jim Schul.
Yes, and while you're at it, leave us a review. It really does help support the show and means a lot.
And it does. Oh, and if you got questions or suggestions for future episodes, like, again, Lauren was the one who suggested, let's talk Disney, let's talk NASA. We would love to hear from you. So you can reach out to us on social media or email us at jim@jimhillmedia.com or lauren@laurenhersey.com.
Yep, and that is it for today's episode, everyone. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on I Want That Too.